I've heard about that.
You
Did it work?
It like did not work.
Yeah.
I would give anything to see Spy Kids in the theaters. I could decide it.
I know, like, I have to watch them, like.
See, I'm not Teen Spy Kid. I'm Teen Anything.
Oh my God, what is up? I never even know about this. Girl, I love.
All right, so let's go ahead then, and did we get to the panic at all, or just the end of
We
it?
got to 1892.
So we got to the election, and did we get to Cleveland winning?
Barely.
Oh, good. Okay. So let me put this up here. And so, what law they thought would create inflation? Farmers did, but actually just stored
The silver buying one.
the silver buying one, which is, I know, Sherman Silver Purchasing Act. What law they thought would regulate monopolies and break them up, but actually did nothing? The Sherman Antitrust Act. What did they think would lower the tariff, but actually raised it? Which tariff? McKinley tariff. What did they think would regulate railroad rates, but didn't do it? Yeah, the ICC. So that's why they started the convention. And where did they have the convention at? The Populist Convention, or the People's Party. Beautiful Omaha, Nebraska. And I went through all the things about that. Free silver came to personify inflation. What kind of tax system did they want? Where the wealthy would pay a greater percentage. What was that called? Progressive income tax. They thought some industries were too important to be left to profit, and they wanted government to have more control over what three industries. They said people just relied upon too much. Railroads is one, good one. And what?
Telegraph and phone.
Telegraph, phone, and what's the last one?
Steel.
Yeah, electricity.
Never mind.
Actually, they thought about steel, but those were the three biggies. And also, I'm forgetting something. Oh, who do they want to have rights? Women and not based upon race. Everybody having rights. Civil rights is more and more. But civil rights means for everybody. But lots of times, civil rights would come to mean color of skin. It's just shorthand. And who do they want to elect senators? Who do they want to elect senators? Yeah, the people instead of us. Most of these things would happen. Some in the progressive era, but most when Franklin Roosevelt was president. But they started it. And part of the thing about getting change is you have to get it started. And you'll see like the modern Republican Party is kind of the modern conservative movement. That was seen as way out of the mainstream in 1960. They got started. And then they took over the economy like they do now. So that's, you can see things happen. They're trying to do the same thing with the New Deal. So, with that, did we get to this? This is where I want, yeah. Oh, let me do that really quick. So, the test is tomorrow. The test is, quiz is tomorrow, quiz. There's going to be 7 multiple choice and 5 matching. So 7 multiple choice, they'll be a little bit more complex. The matching should be really easy, just a little block of matching. Sound good? And then 2 short IDs. One, you have to do boom bust and just draw a very quick picture like overproduction, cutbacks, bust. And call that the deflationary curve. Demand, employment up, boom, inflationary.
So how many, is that just as all three?
No, they have to quick short ID.
So what is the boom bust?
Oh, the boom bust because it kept going. Yeah, and so the big thing about that's going to lead to a real disagreement on which directions the economy go. Should we favor those who supply the goods, like business, or should we favor demand, the workers?
So it brought up the
Yeah. So the conservative versus liberal economics. And we have been conservative economically in the United States your whole life, since 1979. Very conservative economic. This is a conservative economic country. So the good or bad things you can blame on conservative economic. Check.
Is that just on the first row?
Yeah. Yeah, just on the first row. So I asked a couple different questions about unions. Like I will mention the Homestead strike, the Great Railroad strike. You know, that. Yes.
Do we have to write around about the boom bust?
Yes.
And demand drop.
just a quick little overproduction. It's like overproduction, drop in demand, deflationary. That's all I want, bust. That's all I need, just boom, bust, and then just quick. Yeah.
I just couldn't hear, what are the multiple choice questions being covered?
So on that first column of that review list.
Oh, first column, okay. Now,
So there will be a couple on unions. I have a question like on the factors of the second industrial revolution. You know, there'll be a little more complex in the matching, but you check around.
Yeah. Well, that's
And then you must be boom bust, and then the other choices are unionism, social Darwinism, or the populist platform, which is the Omaha platform. Yeah.
what is the populist platform?
Oh, this is going to. This is the basic idea. This will be a big shift into the, for the political parties that will show that there's going to be another option, more liberal option towards economics. Here we go.
And then unionism would just
Yeah, they'll lead to strike after strike about the fight for higher wages. Mhm. All right, then let's go and get to this. Did we get to the panic at all? So in 1893, another horrible panic hit. Yay, boom bust cycle. And same thing, overproduction in railroads, but also a big bubble in finance. And they started creating these things, they call them, today they would say financial instruments. But remember bonds, that's how governments, but also businesses borrow money? They had all these different bonds that were created. And people started investing in them to secure their money. And nobody knew what they were investing in. They all thought they were worth something, and the whole market collapsed. That is why this cover of Puck magazine has Wall Street. This is from 1893. And I love the spider. And it says, flim flam finance. Flim flam or crooked. And by the way, try to say that quickly. Flim flam finance. Try to say it. Flim flam finance. I want to say flim flam finance. Flim flam finance. It's kind of tough. So, by the way, stocks and bonds, they're called securities. Why are they called securities? Because that's something, let's say you have a big pile of money, which is the problem we all have, right? We just have a big mountain of money, you don't know what to do with it. You buy a stock or a bond, that secures your money. It's better than, let's say, putting it under your mattress. It's safer. And so, you get a little piece of paper saying it's a bond or a stock or IOU saying this is worth this much money. You have this piece of paper, it's worth money. But if the bubble bursts, what do you have? Garbage. Yeah. And this was a bad one. I should add that the Panic of 1893 was really close to the panic in your lifetime. 1908, a lot of the same kind of financial shenanigans were going on. But at the same time, another thing that triggered it and made it worse, President Cleveland and Democrats and Republicans repealed the Sherman Silver Purchasing Act. Now, you can see the logic of it. They're just storing the silver in basements. But they were purchasing, the U.S. government, $4 million of silver every month. Overnight, those $4 million that was going into the economy, paying for more mining, workers, they're buying things, stopped. This hurt demand even more. And by just like a wall to demand. So demand is already going down because of the normal boom bust oversupply leads to dropping the demand. And then this. So this was government action that made it worse. You'll see a similar thing during the Great Depression where they raised the tariff, which just froze international trade. And the real big thing was this was so bad and so massive unemployment that fear of revolution was bigger than ever before, especially when this went worldwide. This was a worldwide economic catastrophe. All countries entering the Industrial Revolution were hit. For example, Japan was hit so badly, it's part of the reason they would go to a bloody war with China called the Sino-Japanese War. Russia and Britain almost went to war. Britain and France almost went to war. Austria and Russia almost went to war. You get the point here, this was like a worldwide catastrophe. It's no coincidence that 4 years or 5 years after this, the US went to war. But this cartoon, you'll see a lot for panics. If you type in financial panic, this cartoon will come up almost inevitably if you go on the Google. And so here, remember the paper? This is the paper now that's worthless. And there's a lot of things like push it into the gutter, but this actually is from 1893. And so here's the panic. And that sums up pretty good. You see the people terrified behind. There's a bank run on the bank panic, all that stuff happened. But yeah, I think you can see why I like this poster cartoon the most. Yeah, the random ducks. Not random because there's another one right here. Ducks. Yeah, they're massive ducks. Which is perfect, makes perfect sense. So, don't write this down. So, I was looking for something that to show the business cycle. And I found this, and most of the graph, if you look up stuff, you get garbage like this. This is from the Econ Ed link. What does that tell you? Here's the word I'm looking for. Nothing. Yeah, periods of time.
And there is even a label on the y-axis.
Peak, trough. Yeah, that's why, there's a lot of stuff out there. And most of it is this, worthless. But at the same time, the gates to the used to have a huge zoo in Central Park. The gates collapsed. And all of a sudden, wild animals, or according to the New York Herald, savage brutes at large. Yeah, true. All of a sudden started roaming Manhattan. So, yeah, panic and savage brutes. Yeah, this would have been the time to be alive. So you have a hippopotamus or a rhino, there's an elephant. Supposedly, somebody punched a tiger to save themselves.
It worked.
Supposedly.
It worked.
And here's the thing, who's ever had to fight a tiger? Yeah, you've had, and what's the #1 rule of fighting a tiger? We all know it. Keep your left up. Because they come hard, all tigers come hard with the right. Keep it up, undercut, they expose their chin. Don't box a tiger. They're only 1,000 pounds. One more thing about tigers. They are always hungry. Moving on. So this right down 1894. The next year, 2 events are going to shake the country to its core. The first one is called Toxis Army. Jacob Coxey was a businessman in Ohio, came up with an idea. Why don't we force Washington, D.C., tell our congressmen to give us jobs? Have the government pay for jobs now, increase demand. Well, that cry turned into, let's march on Washington, D.C., camp around the Capitol, demand jobs. And this showed you how desperate people were. I mean, people don't just give up everything and march to Washington, D.C., hoping to get a bad-paying job. People were scared. People were desperate. And thousands marched on Washington, D.C. Here they call it the Common Weal, which means for the common good. For Coxey's Army, they would go through towns and collect money and go on their way. And soon they arrived on the gates of Washington, D.C. There were a lot of people who came from Montana for Coxey's Army. Think about repealing the Sherman-Silver Purchasing Act. There was a lot of miners all of a sudden lost their job. And so you have all these people, and we are in the middle of a panic. All these people around here, so a bunch of miners, like from various parts of Idaho, Montana, went to the new little commercial town here called Missoula. Why is Missoula a commercial town? 3 railroads all connected. The Great Northern, you don't have to know, I'm just telling you. The Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, which are now part of Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and a railroad that's dead now called the Milwaukee. The Milwaukee was just completed. Has anyone driven to Missoula? You ever drive to Missoula and those are big red brick buildings on the south side of the interstate? You wonder what the heck are those big red brick buildings? The Milwaukee was electrified. They came up with a great idea ahead of their time to have electrified trains, and those were the little electric dynamo lines for the Milwaukee Railroad, which pretty ahead of their time. You go to Europe, they're all electric. So it's so much more efficient, so much cleaner. A little dangerous because the trains are really quiet. But back here, they all showed up in Missoula and said, help us go to Washington, D.C. And the people in Missoula are like, no, we have our own problems. So these unemployed miners said, okay, I guess we're staying. So Missoula, the few businesses that were making money, they gathered money together for them, and they bought hundreds of these miners a train ticket to where?
Omaha.
Butte. And they got the view, we're not leaving. So they bought them a ticket to the little tiny town of Bozeman, and then the growing town of Billings, and so on. A lot of people did that, that's how they got to Washington, D.C. Well, it looked like the House was going to pass something. But it also has to pass what body? The Senate, the Millionaires Club. And quickly, with these people camped around the Capitol, they passed a law. Back then, the Congress used to pass all the city laws for Washington, D.C. That would change in 71, so not that long ago. They passed a law saying no walking on the grass in front of the Capitol. They passed it at night. The next morning, they arrested all the leaders of Toxis Army. By the way, what do we call somebody who's arrested? They come up with a law to arrest somebody because they don't like their point of view. Have you ever heard the term political prisoners? That's what they were. They didn't like their politics, so they had them arrested. And the Toxis Army disbanded. I mean, these weren't radicals who wanted to overthrow the government. What did they want? Yeah, they were terrified they wanted a job. Most people who revolt aren't radicals. They're scared. They're terrified. Times were bad. And, oh, I should add, most members of Congress, they look at that and said, you're not unemployed because there are no jobs. You're unemployed because you're lazy, you're immoral, you're going to drink it away if we give you a job. What is that philosophy that believed that? Yeah, they were social Darwinism. That was, in 20 years, it became the dominant philosophy in the world, and it is still the dominant philosophy in the world today. I'm not saying you have it or not have it, but most people have that attitude in some way. So, oh, by the way, if you have a group of people marching on the Capitol calling themselves an army, doesn't that sound like potential revolution? And then, remember the great upheaval, the massive railroad strike in 77? The same thing happened also in 1894. So write down 1894, and it's going to start, we all dubbed it the Pullman strike, it became much bigger than that. What's the Pullman strike? I don't know why I wrote script twice. Just go with me on that. So, Pullman Railway Carriage Company, this is an ad for it. They made the first class, very fancy dining and passenger cars for trains. They're still making money in 1894, but you can imagine their profits were a lot lower. Most of the railroads are still making money. But what are they doing to their wages? Remember 1877, they're cutting them. Well, all the workers in Pullman worked at a company town, and what's scrip again? Yeah, and it can only be used where? And what did they do in the company town where they're all paid with scrip? They raised prices and raised rents. That's the equivalent of a pay cut, isn't it? So they cut their pay. And then they turned around and gave them a real pay cut of a third. So they kept prices up, kept rents up, cut wages. And these are workers. By the way, the vast majority of people in the country today and then are workers in this situation. And they went on strike. That's a picture of the strike. Those are workers. Those are guards and also police around the Pullman factory. Look at the factory. Does that look like what you would think of a factory today? They cared much more about the facade and the looks today. Yes, that might not be practical, but that's still a pretty cool building. Went on strike. It's a relatively local strike in Chicago. But it grew bigger into nationwide strike because of Eugene Debs. He was the leader of the American Railway Union. And he decided this was a growing union of all railroad workers. And they said, we better join or it's going to happen to us. How did they join? They did a boycott. They refused to work on cars that carried Pullman. They refused to work on trains that had Pullman cars. They called it no crossing the picket line. We are not going to go against our brother workers and work on a Pullman car until the workers don't get that pay cut. because they're thinking it's going to happen to us. Now, many governors, including Governor Altgeld, who's the governor of Illinois, are like, we're in a tough situation. They want to send the National Guard out to put down the strike, but workers, they're desperate. They remember Homestead. They remember the great upheaval. But then mail. Railroads carried the mail too. Railroads carry the mail. In the United States Constitution, it says that the federal government has the responsibility to deliver the mail. And so the mail. So what did railroads start doing? They started making sure every train had what kind of cars on it? Mail and a Pullman car. And so if the American railway worker or railway union didn't try to work that, they're violating the Constitution. Very clever in a dark way. It's a trick, it's a scam. Debs knew it. But this would allow the Attorney General, who was the same guy I read you that little bit before about using the ICC, Richard Olney, to get a court order called an injunction. And what did they do? They told the strike, you got to end. End the strike. End the strike because of the mail. A court order. Now, I got to be clear. Debs knew this was scam and refused. Debs refused. I didn't type that in, but Debs refused. This just happened. So, in Texas, at never the hospitals, nurses are being just overworked beyond belief, especially now with hospitals just full because of the virus. I mean, hospitals just full. And what nurses are going through, it's absolutely remarkable how hard they've been working and ignored. I mean, it's really a tragedy. But they're working anywhere from 60 to 72 hours a week. And they were demanding a pay increase. And there was talk of a strike, and a lot of them said, we're quitting, get into a hospital where at least be paid more. And they found a state judge in Texas to give an injunction saying, no, you can't do it. You must work for lower pay because you're a nurse. Which, wow, does that tell you about nurses? You know anybody who's in a nurse right now, and the hospitals are full because of the pandemic right now. It's kind of mind-boggling. But yeah, it happens now. Yeah.
Is that the same as, like, I heard that they were, like, capping pay for travel nurses?
It's very similar, yeah. And they're trying to make it a court order. They're saying, we have no choice. Because if the nurses don't take it now, which is true, people will die. But it's also their lives of the nurses, you know? Yeah, they try to do the same thing in schools. Court order to make teachers go to school. You know, my point is this is going to be used a lot. Did you get the point there? So what happens? Once they refused, that allowed federal troops to come out, and there's fighting in the streets, and they broke up the strike at gunpoint. At least 300 people were killed or wounded in the fights in the streets all over. Here's a picture of it. And this one you can see right here. Conspirators to not deliver the mail, and you notice with conspiracy and obstructing the mails. And that's kind of weird here, mails as a plural, but you know what the heck, right? And they broke the union. But didn't this look like revolution? A nationwide strike and Toxis Army. I mean, we're getting so many appearances now. It's a tiny minority of truckers in Canada, but it looks like it might spill over, are like harassing hospitals because they don't want mask and vaccine mandates. Yeah, they're attacking nurses and things like that, and dumping feces on the lobbies of hospitals in Canada. It's actually kind of mind-boggling because they don't want vaccine mandates for truckers. And it looks like it's going to be spreading here. We have this feeling. So it's amazing how history just kind of gets this little echo. I don't know. So you don't have to write this down, but I put down Cleveland. And this tells you the point of view of the president, on whose side he's on. And everybody knew the mail thing was a scam to break the union. And what does he say? He's completely against the American Railway Union. Uncle Grover, not fond of workers. He said they were lazy. And what happened to Debs? Debs would be arrested. And this changed his mind. He became a full-fledged moderate, but socialist. And I mentioned before, that's when he'd run for president 4 times under the Socialist Party ticket. And here is him being attacked. They show up with a hat being led by the American Railway Union, but it's trying to tie him to bomb-throwing anarchists. See that? The very common attack, which of course he was not, but he would become a socialist. And with that, we come to the election of 1896. And the populace could come out and say, we have an answer. It's pretty good. We have an answer. Unlike the Republicans and Democrats that appear to be social Darwinistic and don't care, we have a solution. So here, this strange pig dog looking thing. Yes, I know, the pig dog. This was put out by supporters of the populace. And it's showing free silver came to represent their platform, just the slogan. And they said, we're going to get all these states. Yet in opposition will be the gold standard. You just have to get this stuff. And that's what they thought they would win. And it says up top, will the tail wag the dog or the dog wag the tail? The dog with the silver, or the dog with the golden tail. And I like the pig dog aspects of it. These are just creepy legs. So if you're wondering what that figure was behind, that's it. So the Republicans nominated William McKinley Terror. He was by then governor of Ohio, so he's in Columbus. And he's from Ohio. You know, Ohio ran Republican politics then. And his continued laissez-faire, which more and more, by 1896, is going to be called conservative. And the roots of conservative economics today, same thing. But they really pushed this gold standard. It was represented by staying on the gold standard, which meant stability. We know what money is worth. And this is the first election where candidates are going to campaign for themselves. Well, he didn't campaign for himself. He gave a couple speeches. He looked like what people thought a president should look like. So this man, look, he wasn't a great speaker. He was talking about him just kind of being blah, blah, blah. I had to show my face. But in 1896, that's what presidents were supposed to look like. And everybody knew, though, the truth. William McKinley was a solely owned entity of Marcus Hanna, the Republican boss of Ohio. That's him on your right. He controlled it, he ran it, he operated this. McKinley, there's going to be all kinds of political cartoons of like he's a puppeteer behind the scenes, or he's in his pocket. And McKinley, it was a not very secret that he was considered to be an absolute moron, a dolt. And that's why they have to see the picture here always drawn. And that's supposed to be Hannah. I know it doesn't look, it looks a little like Hannah. But one thing I like about it is the diamond brooch and then the dollar sign on the thumb. And that's supposed to be Henry Clay. Remember Clay, the great compromiser? And it's supposed to say, no, Clay might have been for saving the country, but it says here, that man Clay, so Hannah's talking, was an ass. It's better to be president than to be right. And when he meant right, he meant moral. And so basically saying this is for power and money, what's McKinley? Was that the truth? It really depended on what side you're on. And even though his opponent is going to actively campaign, McKinley never left the front porch of his governor's mansion in Columbus, Ohio. They literally called the campaign the front porch campaign. And this is still occasionally used where a candidate, they don't want to get him out in public, so he might say something stupid, and we're ahead, let's just hold the lead. Like in 1972, they called it Richard Nixon's campaign was the Rose Garden campaign. These are 2 police officers. I've been by that. My brother lives in Columbus, Ohio. Good story, huh? So, the Democratic convention was a madhouse. Grover Cleveland wanted to be president again, but he said he's still for the gold standard. And many Democrats were going away from the gold standard. So no, he didn't get the nomination. He got the majority of the votes, but the Democratic convention back then required 2/3. So he didn't get the votes. So Grover Cleveland, soon we got to find somebody else. And they had vote after vote. But I should say, Uncle Grover, the most eligible bachelor in America when he was first elected, in his second term got married. I know, some are brokenhearted right now. Uncle Grover got married. And it was actually a big deal because most presidents to this day are older. They don't actually have children being born while they're president. He did. Had a baby. And this was such a big deal in 1895 when he had his daughter, that a new confectionery company using new techniques of manufacturing are going to make a candy bar named after his child. Anyone know? Huh? What did you say?
Baby Ruth.
Baby Ruth.
Yeah.
Baby Ruth. Yeah, Baby Ruth. Ruth Cleveland. I was going to say Three Musketeers, but you beat me too. Yeah, Baby Ruth. Her name is Ruth. No, it has nothing to do with Baby Ruth. Baby Ruth was literally just born. Yeah, Baby Ruth. And so and anybody like Baby Ruth? Baby Ruth? Baby Ruth are pretty good. They're not cat kids, but they're pretty good. So, with this hung convention in Omaha, they met in Omaha to kind of steal away the thunder from the populists. William Jennings Bryan, who was a congressman from Nebraska, in fact, he lived south of Nebraska near Weeping Water, Nebraska. Yes, there's a little town there called Weeping Water, and my dad was born about 10 miles from Weeping Water. He was a lawyer. He moved there from Chicago. 36 years old. Got up to give a speech to the convention. Now, there's 10,000 people in this rickety wooden building. That one spark would have burned the whole thing down. And everybody's smoking back then. So it's amazing they're alive. He would stand up and give a speech. And he was known as a great speaker, and this orator, incomparable. But this speech was absolutely amazing. So you imagine this raucous convention, people arguing and debating, and he got to speak and no one's listening. And this is pre-amplification. All of a sudden, it was like someone said, it's like someone snapped a finger. He got it and pulled them in. And you hear political speeches and like at conventions, and there'll be like applause lines. People will applaud, even if they're a good speaker. They're okay, now we're supposed to applaud. It wasn't like that at all. Everybody was on the edge of their seats, like, enraptured, listening to Bryan speak. And he would give what's considered to be one of the greatest political speeches in history. It would soon be dubbed the Cross of Gold speech. So here's the speech right here. I'm going to read it to you, so get comfortable. We got a few days to go. Are you ready? I'll read you the last couple lines of it. This is just speeches and documents. So he finished. Now imagine, this was the time before lots of technology, so people had attention spans longer than gnats. They're really into the speech. They're not talking. They're hardly breathing. And Bryan finishes with, and remember the gold standard, silver. If they dare come out in the open field and defend the gold standard as a good thing, we will fight them to the uttermost, having behind us the producing masses of this nation and the world, supported by the commercial interests, the laboring interests, and toilers everywhere. We will answer the demand for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. And then he stopped, and everybody's just like no one's breathing. I mean, they can feel like this. And then he finished with a crescendo. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. And there was silence for about 10 seconds. And then the place just erupted in cheers. You can imagine people. That was amazing. We're not sure what it meant, but it was amazing. We love it. And they stormed the stage, picked him up on his shoulders, and by acclamation made him the Democratic nominee. So he would become one of the most important politicians in American history. Just from unknown, 36 years old. the minimum age to be president is 35. So out of nowhere, it was absolutely remarkable. Maybe the greatest political speech. And what political party that was going to meet 2 weeks later in Omaha, they're like, he stole our thunder. The populace. The populace, wait a second. If we nominate our own guy, that will take away votes for Brian and make sure who will be elected president. Remember I told you why we only have 2 parties? That is why. If the populace nominated like Weaver again, they'll split the vote for free silver. McKinley will win. That's why we have 2 parties. And anyone that says we need a third party, well, yeah, but in the system we have, if you believe that, one of the other parties is going to have to go, like the Whigs went. That's why we're kind of stuck, good or bad. So about the populace, they're what we call writing a little Highwire. Get it? Get it? By the way, that same French Highwire artist, he was the one who did in 1971. He went between the brand new Twin Towers in New York at 110 stories up. There's a documentary on that, and if you're scared of heights, watch it. It's fun. I can't even look at that. Look at that mountain valley. It's too high. It makes my... So the populists decide they nominated Brian too. What the heck? They got no one else. Now that cartoon shows Brian as a snake swallowing the Democratic Party, but it was actually the other way around. Brian was the Democrats and they swallowed the populists. Swallowed them. The populists threw the lot into the Democrats and the populists are done. They decided, are we going to become the populist party or join the Democrats? They joined the Democrats. A big moment. Now, they'll have relative influence on the Democrats, but you'll really see it by 1932 with Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. Well, here's a cartoon, though, of the populists, and it shows their attitude. So there's labor on a cross of gold, but the gold is labeled, this is clever, the Republican Party. And putting the crown of thorns, Marcus Hanna, and you notice a little emperor, McKinley in his pocket, but also showing how racist and anti-Semitic the times were. They're standing on the shoulders of bankers. Remember they hate bankers? And this is the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds is a large banking family, and they're Jewish. And look at that caricature of the face. That is a very common, with a dollar sign for the nose, caricature of Jews. This is one, for this whole time period, from about 1870 to about 1950, so shockingly anti-Semitic in the United States, but nationwide. And the amazing thing is, every time I see that picture, you can see that in the copy of Der Stürmer magazine in 1930. By the way, what's Der Stürmer? It's the Nazi propaganda magazine.
There we go.
Now, nothing's cut and dry, is it? There's a lot of gray areas in these movements, which makes it's hard. There's no like, yes, good, bad. No, okay. Well, this ended the populists. There's the balloon going. The populists now are basically done. If Brian loses, they're done. And the slogan became free silver, and that represented their policy. Inflation, which meant let's get money out there, more credit, free coinage of silver, greenbacks, anti-monopoly, workers' rights. But they couldn't shake the anti-urban bias of their main supporters. They never appealed to workers, and that's why they couldn't get the big cities, and this is really going to hurt them. And by the way, this is tainting Brian with its gold cross, and you notice in the background, anarchy. So free silver versus laissez-faire. But it shows there's a real change going on. So it became a fight between gold versus silver. Stability, the gold standard. They call them gold bugs. You are a little bug here. Or the silver bugs. What it's stability, what silver means? Money for the people. Money for the people. What are you going to stand for? A better life for people or the stability? Let's be clear about it. Keeping things the same with money on top. Gold bugs, silver bugs. And Brian is going to run the first ever real presidential campaign. And we'll finish this tomorrow after the quiz. Quiz take about 20 minutes. I really think you're going to do well. Quick study. You'll go through a couple of the factors. Make sure you got the strikes for the unions. So I will ask a question where you have to know, like, homestead and Haymarket affairs. That's a big part of unionism. That's going to be a multiple choice or a match. Don't forget the railroad strike. The social Darwin is one of your choices. Well, think about what it led to. So there's real political divides. You get people on the left are against social Darwinism. And most politicians will become believers. But the big thing is he's going to try to keep government working. Goodbye, everybody. And I'm not
I
going to
literally did the same thing last night where I literally had
Right.
I just screwed up and didn't do any of my homework until like literally at 9 p.m. And then I was so tired. It's just like laying on my bed.
Ah.
And I was like, I literally do nothing. Like,
Do you guys want to take the Cold War movies test?
Yeah. They have to be together.
Uh,
Do you get to watch a lot of movies and stuff with topics?
sure. Even there's always gonna be a little assignment or something. Yeah, we watch movies. Yeah. See you tomorrow. Oh, what do you want? A quiz?
Yeah.
You want to take the 50s movie quiz from the 50s in the Cold War? Yeah. You do? Here you go. One of my questions, because we're doing Cold War and like there's all these nuclear tests, so they thought like radiation was creating mutants and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the questions are, what was the name from a movie given to giant radioactive mutated ants? You know? You don't know? There's a movie called Them, and it's like giant ants are going to take over. And this might shock you. It's actually not a bad movie. You're not, save your paper, I'm sorry. You can write that. Since I don't need the copies anymore, and just put the letters right next. I know it's some. Okay. Just put the letter right next to them.
Okay, thank you.
Scary man. Scary man who defeated the Nazis. Huh?
I think this might be the one.
Oh, that's the wrong one. Yeah, this is chapter 19. You don't want to do chapter 19? What did I do with chapter 20? Oh, it's right here. Oh, and I got good news for both of them. Really good news. It's going to make you feel really good. The answer to number 8, I forgot where I ended when I wrote the quiz, right? So I did a good reading. So the answer to number 8, there's a very good chance that it's G. And the answer to number 10, there's a very good chance that is B.
8
and 10. 8 and 10, G and D. So you're guaranteed a 20%. I don't know. China has caused by radiation.